when you see AOC and Bernie Sanders sell out, you see them walking with Biden, you see them giving cover to Biden. The only way they're able to pivot and keep any level of believability that they're left, they have to have advocates in the media, in print media, in independent media, in corporate media. They have to have advocates helping to whitewash their image. So how pseudo-left media whitewash the sins of Bernie Sanders is what I kind of want to discuss, because when I was looking for different headlines, different stories that I wanted to talk about today, this headline popped up. The headline is technically true. But as I spoke to this earlier in the previous segment, I mentioned how the pseudo-left media, like the Jacobins, the Common Dreams, the Guardians, all of those pseudo-left media outlets, they look the other way or pretend not to see the sins of Bernie Sanders as much. They might flip a headline or two, and it's really watered down, not really going at him the way they should. Like not mentioning his name in a headline, but talking about him, stuff like that. And even in the instance of like what they're talking about here, even in the same instance about Israel, when he wasn't on so much the good side, there wasn't tons of headlines about it. When he was getting protested, it was one or two headlines. It wasn't in the same way. In the same way that when he's now on the right side, now he's speaking about stopping this war and not funding it and all of this stuff. That's when they want to put out tons of headlines. This is how they help to whitewash Bernie Sanders. You downplay the bad stuff and you spotlight the crumbs of good stuff that he does. Even if it's virtue signaling, like this article, like this headline kind of talks about. And I'll read the headline. It says, Sanders pushes amendment to cut billions in offensive military funding to Israel. And here's in the subheadline, the quote is, enough is enough, said Senator Bernie Sanders. We cannot continue to fund this horrific war. Now, you see very clear in the headline, Sanders, you know what they're talking about. They even give quotes to make sure, if you don't read the entire article, remember I said the satellite progressives, they know, oh, Bernie Sanders on the right side. Now, if I'm a satellite progressive and I never hear you talk about how when he was on the wrong side, and I'm just here to see headlines because, again, I work 60 hours because I only get paid $8.50. They know this at Jacobin. They know this over at Common Dream, over at The Guardian. They know that. That's why they do what they do. They don't want the Bernie Sanders and the AOCs to leave the Democratic Party too. They all are adjacent to power. They want to be in the room, even if it's at the kiddie table, long as they're in the room. So let me bring up this article actually. This is from Common Dream, just for those that might. So if you want to look up the headline, you can find it on Common. Wait a minute. This is not from the article. This is because I'm not reading the article. The article is a acknowledgement of his virtue signaling, because this is virtue signal. This is what Sanders does, and a lot of the progressives. They put up these bills when they know they're not going to go anywhere, so they can project that they're doing something progressive. They use these bills, and Bernie Sanders uses these amendments as virtue signaling projection tools. So all of his buddies in independent pseudo-left media can go out and write great headlines, can go out and do great coverage. Bernie Sanders is trying, as he's propping up, as he's doing things like consenting to unanimous consent with the railroad strike. Bernie Sanders didn't vote yes in the vote, but he voted yes to consent to have it speed up. That's the same thing. But the headlines that the pseudo-left outlets do, they're not going to say anything about that. They're just going to say, Bernie Sanders votes no on it. Are you going to talk about how he voted yes on a unanimous consent to move the bill quickly to break a strike? Are you going to talk about that? So this is my tweet, and I say these headlines illustrate how Pseudo-left media like Jacobin, Common Dream, and The Guardian all help to facilitate the whitewashing of Bernie Sanders and other so-called progressives, specifically on Israel-Palestine. They love to put out headlines like these when Bernie Sanders is virtue signaling, but when he's concretely voting against Palestine, those headlines never seem to reach publication. Here's some other headlines. Here's another one. Bernie Sanders to Benjamin Netanyahu, stop murdering innocent people. Got one more headline to show you. Here's this one. Bernie Sanders calls for end to Israel strikes and killing of thousands. This is how they whitewash these people. But let's go back to what happened to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders gets interrupted and confronted in Dublin for being unable to describe what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. So here is Bernie Sanders.
Is a UN trying to bring about a ceasefire, a humanitarian pause ceasefire, in order to provide the desperately needed aid that the Gaza people need. When you get to the word, I get a little bit queasy, and I don't. What genocide? We use the word. We've got to be careful about that word.
It is a genocide.
What's your definition of genocide?
Bernie, you have funded Zionism yourself. You have funded the Israeli settler state. Here you are pretending you aren't. It is disgusting. Liar, liar, genocide denier. Liar, liar, genocide denier. It's disgusting. It is reprehensible. You are a child killer. You are a genocide denier. The United States military industrial complex are the largest murderers in the world. It does not matter if it is a Democrat or a Republican. You have murdered people around the world. The Native Americans are still being genocided. I have never heard you once speak about genocide.
That's the Bernie Sanders that they whitewash. That's what these pseudo-left media outlets do. More Perfect Union is another one. I'm sorry to let you guys know. That's run by Social Democrat. That's Farhad, his former campaign manager. Farhad, the guy with the name that starts with an F. Bashir Shakari. He started More Perfect Union. That's why a lot of More Perfect Union, they do a lot of good union stuff, but understand, union leadership is co-opted by the Democratic Party. That's why he's doing this. If union leadership wasn't co-opted by the Democratic Party, there would be no More Perfect Union. It's another way of putting hooks into workers and keeping them with the Democratic Party. If you go through the content of More Perfect Union on Twitter, for example, you notice they rarely criticize AOC and Bernie Sanders. But when they do something good, they do put shit up there. Then you notice they rarely go ham at Joe Biden. That's not a coincidence. They're Democratic adjacent. So just to kind of seal this segment about Bernie Sanders, let's end it with Norm talking about Bernie Sanders a little bit.
My innards writhe at the despicable thing you said in the interview today, whether it was moral idiocy, whether it was exemplary of being a moral monster, or whether it was cynical opportunism, because you're too much of a coward to break ranks with President Biden. I don't know which it is. When you oppose a ceasefire at this point, you are in effect and in fact, you are in effect and in fact, giving Israel carte blanche to continue to indiscriminately target the civilian infrastructure and the civilian population of Gaza, 1 million of whom, or 1,100,000 of whom, are children. You have become a moral monster.
That is what Norm Finkelstein's critique of Bernie Sanders was in the beginning of this. I'm not quite sure if they reported on Norm calling Bernie Sanders that, but I can probably bet, I would put money on that they did not. But I'm not sure. Maybe they did, and I just didn't hear of something like that that would be very big
My
in our
innards
space.
rise.
I guess that's possible.